She swore purity before walking down the aisle, but her eyes hid a secret. The millionaire thought he had found the perfect woman until the wedding night. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The fine rain of Portland trickled down the library windows like tears that Claire Davis knew all too well. Sitting among piles of dusty documents, she adjusted her glasses and tried not to think about the emptiness she had carried in her chest since arriving in the city. It had been 3 years since she had left behind the small town lost in rural Oregon, where she'd grown up hearing whispers about her dead mother and secrets that no one dared to speak aloud. At 28, Claire had built a life of silences. She would wake up in the tiny apartment she shared with a roommate, take the crowded bus to the municipal library, and spend her days immersed in words written by others. It was easier to live through books than to face the reality of being a woman without family, without roots, without a true place in the world. Her only company was the fragmented memories of her grandmother, who had died, taking with her the answers Claire needed most. That Monday morning, when the phone rang at her desk, Claire had no idea that her life was about to change forever. The formal voice on the other end announced a temporary transfer. She would be responsible for organizing the historical archives of the Whitecrest Foundation, one of the most respected institutions in the Pacific Northwest. The name made her heart race for reasons she couldn't explain. Whitecrest. How many times had she heard that name being whispered by her grandmother on stormy nights? The foundation headquarters was in a restored mansion in Portland's historic district, its stone walls telling stories more than a century old. Claire climbed the marble steps with a racing heart, carrying her worn bag and all the courage she could muster. The doorman, an elderly gentleman in an impeccable uniform, guided her through corridors adorned with antique paintings and Persian rugs to a room at the back of the building. It was there, among shelves filled with documents yellowed, by time that she saw him for the first time. Henry Whitecrest was standing with his back to her, examining an old map spread across a mahogany table. His brown hair had silver strands that reflected the soft afternoon light, and when he turned around, Claire felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. He was exactly how she had imagined a Whitecrest should be, tall, elegant, with aristocratic features sculpted by time and lineage. But there was something in his dark eyes that surprised her. A deep melancholy, a loneliness that she immediately recognized because she carried the same mark in her soul. "You must be Claire," he said, extending his hand with a restrained smile. "Henry Whitecrest, thank you for accepting this job. I know, it's not exactly what you usually do." His hand was firm and warm, and Claire realized she held it longer than she should have. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Whitecrest. I'm eager to learn about your family's history." Something passed through his eyes when she said that. A quick shadow, almost imperceptible. History. Yes, we all have one, don't we? Some are just more complicated than others. In the days that followed, Claire immersed herself in the archives with a dedication that surprised even herself. There were letters from the 19th century, land contracts, faded photographs of serious men in dark suits and women in long dresses. Each document was a window to the past, and she lost track of time organizing, cataloging, trying to decipher ancient handwriting and unravel the secrets those papers held. Henry appeared every day, always in the late afternoon, when the golden light of the sunset invaded the room through the tall windows. He would sit in the leather armchair on the other side of the table and watch her work, asking questions about what she had found, telling stories about great-grandparents he had known only through portraits and family legends. "My great-grandmother, Eleanor, was known for her beauty," he said on a rainy afternoon, pointing to a photograph where a young woman posed next to an austere man. "They say she fell deeply in love with a piano teacher who came to give lessons here at the house. But it was a different time. Love wasn't always an option." Claire looked up from the document she was examining. "And what happened to her?" "She married whom the family chose, had children, fulfilled her role, but the older servants at the estate say she was never the same after they sent the teacher away. Some say she died of a broken heart, not fever, as stated on the death certificate." The story touched Claire in a way she hadn't expected. It must have been terrible to live, a love that couldn't exist. Henry studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to see through her. "Do you believe in destiny, Claire?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Why do you ask?" "Sometimes I get the feeling that certain people enter our lives for a specific reason, as if there were something greater, bringing us together." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry, I must sound strange talking like this." "It doesn't sound strange," she said softly, feeling her heart quicken. "Sometimes I feel that way too." The silence that followed was charged with a tension that neither dared to name. Claire returned to the documents, but she could feel his gaze upon her, warm as a caress. When she finally looked up again, Henry had moved closer, stopping beside her chair to examine the paper she was holding. "This is interesting," he murmured, his voice so close that she could feel his breath on her neck. "It's a marriage contract. From the 1920s. See how formal it is, almost commercial." Claire tried to focus on the words written on the yellowed sheet, but all she could perceive was his proximity, the masculine scent he exuded, the heat emanating from his body. When he extended his arm to point something out in the document, lightly brushing against her shoulder, she felt a shiver run down her spine. "Claire," he said softly, and there was something different in his voice. When she turned to face him, their faces were just inches apart. Time stopped. The world reduced to that tiny space between them, charged with possibilities and dangers. Claire could see every detail of his eyes, the way his pupils dilated, the tense line of his jaw. He slowly raised his hand, as if to touch her face, but at the last second, he pulled back. "I'm sorry," he murmured, stepping away. "I shouldn't." "Henry," she said, but he was already heading for the door. "See you tomorrow, Claire." And then she was alone again, with her racing heart and the certainty that something irrevocable had begun between them. Something that could either save her or completely destroy her. The days that followed were a delicate dance of approach and retreat. Henry arrived at the archives room always at the same time, but now maintained a careful distance, as if fearing that one wrong move could break something fragile that had been born between them. Claire pretended not to notice the tension that hung in the air, but every fiber of her body was alert to his presence. It was on a cloudy Thursday that she found the first clue about her own past. Among the 1995 documents, there was a folder, marked Domestic Staff Confidential. Her hands trembled as she opened the yellowed envelope. There it was, a list of employees from the Whitecrest estate, and in the middle of it, handwritten in faded blue ink, the name Maria Davis, housekeeper, hired in March 1995. Claire's heart stopped. Maria Davis was her mother, the woman who had died when she was only 3, leaving behind a daughter and an ocean of mysteries. For the first time, Claire had concrete proof that her mother had actually worked for the Whitecrests. But what else had happened at that estate? Why did her grandmother always change the subject when she asked about her mother's death? Found something interesting? Henry's voice made her jump in her chair. He was standing at the door, watching her curiously. Claire quickly closed the folder, her heart racing. "Just old documents, nothing very relevant." Henry approached, and she realized he had noticed her nervousness. "Claire, is everything okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," she lied, trying to smile. "Just tired." He sat in the chair next to her, closer than he had been in recent days. "You know, sometimes I get the impression that you're looking for something specific here. It's not just work, is it?" The question caught her off guard. Claire stared at him, seeing in his eyes an understanding. That frightened her. "Why do you say that?" "The way you examine each document as if you're looking for answers, and there's something familiar about you." He paused, studying her face. "I can't explain it, but since the first day I feel like I already know you." His words made Claire's stomach tighten. Could it be possible that he knew something about her mother? "Henry, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. Do you remember an employee named Maria Davis? She worked here in the 90s. Henry's face changed instantly. A shadow passed through his eyes, and Claire saw his hands close into fists on the table. "Why are you asking about her?" "Did you know her?" Claire could barely breathe. Henry stood up abruptly, walking to the window. For a long moment he was silent, looking at the rain that was starting to fall outside. "Maria, yes, I remember her. She was a very beautiful woman, kind. She worked as a housekeeper in the main house. What happened to her?" "She died," he said dryly, without turning around. "An accident, if I'm not mistaken. Why this sudden interest?" Claire felt tears stinging her eyes. "Because she was my mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Henry turned slowly, his face completely pale. "Your mother?" "I grew up hearing whispers about her having worked for a wealthy family, but I never knew details. When I found out I would be working here, I thought it might be a coincidence, but now you're here looking for answers," he completed, his voice hoarse. "I need to know what happened to her, Henry. I need to know the truth." He sat down again, this time taking Claire's hands between his. "The truth isn't always what we want to hear." "It doesn't matter. I need to know." Henry sighed deeply. "Your mother, she wasn't just an employee to my family. She was important to someone very close to me." "What do you mean?" "My uncle Edward was single, lived at the estate with us. He and Maria, they fell in love. It was a silent scandal. My family didn't approve, of course. A Whitecrest with a domestic worker." Claire felt the world spinning around her. "They had a relationship?" "Yes, and when she got pregnant..." Henry stopped, looking directly into her eyes. "My family sent her away. Edward tried to prevent it, but my grandfather was relentless. He said that if Edward chose to stay with Maria, he would be disinherited." "And he chose the family," said Claire, her voice bitter. "He chose cowardice," Henry corrected, "and regretted it for the rest of his life. He died 5 years ago, but until the end he asked about Maria and the daughter she was expecting." The tears finally overflowed from Claire's eyes. "The daughter, who was me." "You're a Whitecrest, Claire. Edward was your father." The revelation fell on her like lightning. All her life she had felt like an orphan without a past, without identity, and now she discovered that she carried the blood of the same family that had rejected her even before she was born. "That's why you said I looked familiar," she murmured. "You have his eyes, the same face shape." Henry gently caressed her tear-stained face. "And now I understand why I felt so attracted to you. From the first moment, it wasn't just desire, it was recognition." Claire pulled away, her heart breaking. "So we're relatives then, cousins." "Distant cousins," he said softly. "And that doesn't change what I feel for you." "Henry, we can't..." "Yes, we can." He stood up, pulling her to him. "My family already destroyed Edward and Maria's love. They won't destroy ours." Before Claire could protest, he kissed her. It was a desperate kiss, full of years of loneliness and repressed desire. Claire tried to resist for a moment, but soon surrendered, her arms wrapping around his neck as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had just crumbled. When they finally separated, both were breathless. "This is madness," whispered. "Claire?" "The best madness of my life," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Claire, I want you in my life, no matter what my family thinks, no matter the obstacles. I want you to be my wife." The word wife echoed in Claire's mind like a distant bell. Henry was offering everything she had always dreamed of: love, family, a place in the world. But there was something he didn't know, a secret she carried like a stone in her chest. There was another man in her life, or rather, there had been. Jason, a married lawyer who had seduced her with empty promises and abandoned her when she needed him most, and now within her womb grew the fruit of that mistake. "Henry, You don't have to answer now," he said, kissing her hands. "Just think about it. We can start over, together. You, me, and the truth, finally revealed." But Claire knew that some truths were too heavy to carry alone, and the one she kept could destroy not only her future with Henry, but every chance of happiness that finally seemed to be within her reach. The weeks that followed were the most intense of Claire's life. Henry courted her with the determination of a man who had found his reason for living, Flowers arrived at her desk every day, invitations to intimate dinners at discreet restaurants, and long conversations that extended into the early hours. He talked about plans for the future, how he would renovate the east wing of the estate so she could have her own library, how he would confront the family if necessary. Claire allowed herself to be enveloped by that dream, but the weight of the secret she carried grew each day, as did the life within her womb. She was already in her 12th week of pregnancy, and soon the signs would become impossible to hide. The morning sickness she attributed to nervousness, the sensitive breasts she disguised with looser blouses, everything conspired against her. One night, while dining at an elegant restaurant in downtown Portland, Henry took her hand across the table and looked at her with that intensity that always made her tremble. "Claire, I can't wait any longer. I want to marry you." The fork slipped from her fingers, falling onto the plate with a noise that seemed to echo throughout the restaurant. "Henry, I know it's fast, but when you know you've found the right person, time ceases to matter." He took a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "This belonged to my great-grandmother Eleanor, the one I told you about. Ironically, she never got to wear it with the man she loved, but you can." The box opened to reveal an antique diamond ring, delicate and luminous. Claire felt tears welling in her eyes, but this time they weren't of happiness. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Marry me, Claire. Let's write our own story, different from all the other white crests. A story of true love." The irony of his words pierced her like a blade. A story of true love built upon a lie that grew in her womb each day. "Henry, there are things about me that you don't know." "It doesn't matter," he said, placing the ring on her finger. "The past doesn't define the future. What matters is that we found each other, that we love each other." "But what if the past is something that changes everything?" Henry held her face between his hands. "Nothing can change what I feel for you. Nothing, Claire. You've brought me back to life." That night she accepted, not out of courage, but out of cowardice, out of fear of losing the only man who had truly loved her, out of terror of returning to the loneliness that had been her companion for so many years. When he kissed her to seal the commitment, Claire closed her eyes and tried to believe that love would be enough to sustain the lie she was building. The wedding preparations began immediately. Henry wanted a quick, intimate ceremony, just for close family members at the estate. Claire was grateful for this. The fewer people, the less chance of someone noticing the changes in her body. But as the date approached, her anxiety grew exponentially. It was during a visit to the estate to choose the ceremony location that Claire had her first real encounter with the Whitecrest aristocracy. The property was even more imposing than she had imagined. Acres of cultivated land, a main house that looked more like a palace, and annexes that housed generations of history and secrets. Mrs. Helen, Henry's aunt and the family matriarch, received her in the main room with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was a woman in her 60s, elegant and sharp as a blade. "So you're the librarian who won over our Henry," she said, examining Claire from head to toe. "I must admit, I expected someone different." "Different how?" asked Claire, trying to keep her voice steady. "More on the family's level, let's say. But Henry has always been singular in his choices." The venom in the woman's words was subtle, but lethal. Claire felt her face flush, but Henry appeared at her side before she could respond. "Aunt Helen, I hope you're being kind to my fiancée." "Of course, dear. Just trying to get to know her better." Mrs. Helen smiled coldly. "After all, she's going to be part of the family. It's important that she understands our traditions." During lunch, Claire was subjected to a disguised interrogation. Questions about her family, her education, her plans for the future. Each answer was analyzed, weighed, judged. When she mentioned that she was an orphan raised by her grandmother, she saw glances being exchanged around the table. "It's a shame we don't have acquaintances in common," said Mrs. Helen. "In families like ours, it's always comforting when there are suitable connections." "Actually," said Henry, his voice tense, "Claire does have connections to our family. She is Edward's daughter." The silence that followed was deadly. Claire saw Mrs. Helen's face turn pale. and the other family members look at each other with shock and something that seemed like terror. "Edward?" whispered the matriarch. "Impossible." "Very possible," replied Henry. "Maria Davis was her mother, the woman Edward loved and whom you expelled from here." "Henry," Mrs. Helen's voice cut through the air like a whip, "don't speak of things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I understand that this family destroyed my uncles. Love through prejudice and pride, and they won't destroy mine." Mrs. Helen rose slowly, her eyes fixed on Claire with an intensity that made her shrink back in her chair. "If she really is Edward's daughter, then there are matters that need to be discussed. Legal matters." "What matters?" asked Claire, her voice weak. "Inheritance, my dear. If you are Edward's legitimate daughter, you have rights to part of this property." The revelation fell on Claire like a bucket of cold water. She hadn't thought about the legal implications of her parentage. She didn't want money or properties. She wanted only love and acceptance. "I don't want anything," she said quickly. "I didn't come here for an inheritance." "No?" Mrs. Helen's smile was predatory. "How convenient. A poor orphan who discovers she's the heir to a fortune and marries the nephew of the deceased. Very convenient indeed." "Enough!" Henry slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. "Claire isn't opportunistic. She didn't even know about the family connection when we met." "Oh, she didn't know?" Mrs. Helen raised an eyebrow. "What a remarkable coincidence, then, that she got exactly the job that brought her to our family." Claire felt the world beginning to spin. The woman's insinuations were planting seeds of doubt that she knew would grow in Henry's mind. "I swear I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," said Henry, but Claire noticed a small hesitation in his voice that chilled her to the bone. That night in the hotel where they were staying, the atmosphere between them was tense. Henry paced back and forth across the room, his hands in his hair. "They're going to make this hell," he muttered. "They'll question every motivation of yours, every word." "And you?" asked Claire softly. "Will you question too?" He stopped and looked at her. "No, I trust you." But there was something in his eyes that said otherwise, a shadow of doubt that didn't exist before. Claire realized that her lie was no longer just about the pregnancy. Now it included her own honesty about how she had come to them. That night, when Henry kissed her, she felt for the first time a distance between them. Small, almost imperceptible, but real. And she knew that time was running out. Soon, very soon, all her secrets would come to light, and she would lose not only the man she loved, but also the chance to belong somewhere in the world. The wedding was scheduled for 2 weeks from then. Claire just hoped she could make it there before her belly grew enough to betray the lie that her life had become. The wedding day dawned with a flawless blue sky over the Whitecrest estate, as if even nature conspired to create the illusion of perfection. Claire woke up in the guest room of the main house with her stomach in knots, a mixture of nervousness, morning sickness, and the excruciating anxiety of someone who was about to make the most important mistake of her life. She was in her 15th week of pregnancy, and although she could still disguise her belly with the carefully chosen wedding dress, she knew that time was rapidly running out. In recent days, she had to be creative to hide the changes in her body from Henry, inventing excuses to dress in the bathroom, avoiding letting him touch her for too long. The makeup artist and hairstylist worked in silence, transforming her into the perfect bride that everyone expected to see. In the mirror, Claire saw a stranger, beautiful, radiant, but completely fake. The French lace dress embraced her body in such a way that no one would suspect the life growing inside her, and the silk veil had belonged to Henry's great-grandmother, symbolically connecting her to a lineage she now belonged to by right of blood. "You look beautiful," said Mrs. Helen, entering the room without knocking. The family matriarch wore a navy blue dress and an expression that mixed resignation and vigilance. "Henry is a lucky man." "Thank you," murmured Claire, trying to read between the lines of the seemingly gentle tone. "I hope you understand that our family has certain expectations. We are traditional people, with values that have been built over generations." Mrs. Helen approached, adjusting Claire's veil with precise movements. "A marriage is not just the union of two people. It's the fusion of stories, heritages, futures. Claire met the woman's eyes in the mirror. I understand. Do you really? The question came loaded with meaning. Because you see, my dear, we've discovered some interesting things about your past. Small details that may have escaped your memory. Claire's heart stopped. What details? Oh, nothing too significant. Just that you haven't been completely alone these past few months. A lawyer named Jason Marshall. Familiar name? Claire's world collapsed. Jason was the father of the child she carried, the married man who had seduced her and abandoned her when he learned of the pregnancy. How had Mrs. Helen discovered about him? I see the name brings back memories, continued the matriarch, her smile cold as ice. It's impressive how people leave trails, isn't it? Hotel records, restaurant receipts, photographs, all very contemporary to the period when you met my nephew. Claire felt nausea rising in her throat, and this time it had nothing to do with the pregnancy. What do you want? I want honesty. I want my nephew to know exactly who he's marrying before he makes an irreparable mistake. Mrs. Helen leaned in, whispering in Claire's ear, either you tell him the truth or I will. Your choice. Before Claire could respond, the door opened and Henry entered, impeccable in his dark grey suit. His eyes shone when he saw her, and Claire felt her heart shatter. He was so happy, so radiant with genuine love, that she could barely breathe. You shouldn't see me before the ceremony, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I couldn't resist. He approached, kissing her forehead tenderly. You look perfect, absolutely perfect. Mrs. Helen cleared her throat discreetly. Henry, dear, I need to speak with you. There are some last-minute details. Not now, Aunt Helen. Today is my day of happiness. That's exactly why I need to talk to you. The woman's voice became firmer. They are important matters about Claire. Henry frowned, looking between the two women. What matters? Claire felt her mouth go completely dry. This was the moment. She could tell the truth now, confess everything, and hope that his love was strong enough to forgive her. Or she could try one last lie, one last chance to make it to the altar. Henry, she began, but her voice came out as a whisper. What is it? He took her hands, noticing how cold they were. Claire, you're trembling. I need to tell you something. Something important. His eyes filled with concern. You can tell me. Whatever it is, we'll solve it together. Claire took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she could find. I'm not the woman you think I am. What do you mean? There are things in my past. Relationships. She swallowed hard, seeing the confusion grow on his face. Henry, I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire saw all the emotions pass across Henry's face in slow motion. Confusion, shock, pain, anger. His hands released hers as if they had been burned. Pregnant? His voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable. 16 weeks, she whispered. 16. He quickly did the calculation. So when we met, you were already... Yes. Henry backed away as if he had been punched. And the father? Claire closed her eyes, feeling tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Jason Marshall, a lawyer, he's married. Married? Henry repeated the word as if it were poisonous. You had an affair with a married man and you're pregnant. By him. Henry, please let me explain. Explain what? His voice rose in tone, full of pain and fury. Explain how you lied to me from day one, how you let me fall in love with you, knowing you were carrying another man's child. I love you, Claire shouted, desperate. I truly love you. Love? Henry laughed, but it was a bitter sound, full of disbelief. You don't even know what love is. Love is honesty, Claire. Love is trust. You made a fool of me. Mrs. Helen observed the scene with barely disguised satisfaction. Henry, dear, perhaps we should discuss this later. No! He turned to his aunt, his eyes flaming. You knew, didn't you? You found out and were waiting for this moment to humiliate me. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? Henry was beside himself now. You're all the same. Manipulative liars. My entire family is rotten. Claire tried to approach him, but Henry raised his hand, stopping her. "Don't come near me," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Not now, maybe never again. Henry, please. There are 100 people downstairs waiting to see us get married. 100 people who came to celebrate our supposed happiness." He ran his hands through his hair, disheveling it. "How am I going to explain that all of this was a farce?" "It wasn't a farce." Claire was openly crying now. "My feelings for you are real." "Your feelings?" Henry stared at her with a coldness she had never seen before. "You want to know what I think of your feelings? I think you saw an opportunity to get rid of a problem. A pregnant orphan who discovered she had rights to an inheritance and found a love-struck idiot to solve her life." His words hit her like slaps. "That's not true." "Isn't it? Then tell me, Claire, when exactly were you planning to tell me the truth after the wedding? After I had signed papers recognizing you as my wife? Or were you going to wait until the child was born and try to convince me that I was the father?" Claire couldn't speak. His accusations were so cruel, so distant from the gentle man she had known, that it was as if she were looking at a stranger. "I'm going to cancel the wedding," Henry said coldly, "and you're going to leave my property, now." "Henry." "Now!" His shout echoed through the room, and Claire finally understood that she had lost everything. The love of her life, the chance for a family, the possibility of belonging somewhere, all destroyed by the truth she had tried to hide. The 3 months that followed were the darkest of Claire's life. She returned to her small apartment in Portland like a ghost, carrying only a suitcase and the crushing weight of humiliation. The scandal of the cancelled wedding spread through the city's social circles like wildfire. Pregnant librarian tries to take advantage of millionaire heir. Lying orphan deceives traditional family. The headlines of the tabloid newspapers were merciless. Claire lost her job at the municipal library. The management cited profile incompatibility after the negative repercussions, but she knew it was just a polite form of dismissal for moral scandal. Her savings ran out quickly, and she found herself forced to accept cleaning jobs to survive, hiding the growing belly under loose clothes and old coats. The pregnancy progressed, but not without complications. At 4 months, Claire began having sporadic bleeding that forced her to seek medical care at the neighborhood clinic. The doctor, a kind man with graying hair, examined her. With growing concern, "Ms. Davis, your blood pressure is very high and there are signs of fetal stress. Are you going through a period of intense emotional tension?" Claire almost laughed at the question. Emotional tension? She had lost the love of her life, her reputation, her job, and lived in constant fear of not having enough money to support the child that was coming. "A little," she answered. "I'm prescribing absolute rest, and I need you to understand. Any additional bleeding, any strong pain, and you should come immediately to the hospital. This pregnancy is at risk." It was that afternoon, walking through the streets of Portland with the prescription in hand and tears in her eyes, that Claire bumped into someone who would change the course of her life again. "Claire? Claire Davis?" She looked up and found her familiar face, though more mature than she remembered. Jason Marshall was standing on the sidewalk, impeccable as always in his dark suit, but with an expression of genuine shock at seeing her. "Jason." Her voice came out weaker than she intended. "My God, you're pregnant." His eyes fixed on the belly she could no longer completely hide. "I am." Is it mine?" Claire almost laughed at the irony. The biological father of the child found her by chance on the street and asked the question that Henry never had the chance to ask with a calm mind. "Yes, it's yours." Jason ran a hand through his hair, looking around nervously. "We need to talk. Not here on the street. Come on, there's a cafe on the corner." At the cafe, seated at a table in the back, Jason studied Claire's face with an intensity that made her feel uncomfortable. He was different from the charming man who had seduced her months ago. There was a hardness in his eyes, a cold calculation that she hadn't noticed before. "I heard about the scandal with the Whitecrests," he said after ordering 2 coffees. "It was in the papers." "You read about it?" "I read, and I was intrigued." Jason leaned forward. A librarian orphan who discovers she's the illegitimate daughter of a Whitecrest and almost marries the nephew of the deceased. Quite a story. It wasn't planned, if that's what you're insinuating. No? He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Claire, you underestimate me. I investigated your little romantic adventure. You know what I found out? Claire felt a chill in her stomach. What did you find out? That Henry Whitecrest was disinherited 5 years ago. Officially, he's still the face of the family, but legally, he has no rights to anything. The assets are all in the name of family trusts controlled by his aunt, Mrs. Helen. I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. But you know what else? I discovered that Edward Whitecrest, your supposed father, left a specific will. If any direct descendant of his appeared, they would be entitled to a considerable slice of the inheritance. About $8 million. The number echoed in Claire's mind like a distant echo. 8 million. It was more money than she could even imagine. And here you are, continued Jason, carrying my child, but with legal rights that could make us very, very rich. Make us? Claire, darling, you're an intelligent woman. You must have realized that your current situation isn't sustainable. No job, no money, pregnant and stained by a public scandal. He paused, sipping his coffee. I can solve all these problems. How? By marrying you. Claire almost spat out the coffee. You're married, Jason. Was married. My wife found out about our relationship. The divorce is being finalized. She gets half of my current assets, but has no right to anything I acquire after the official separation. His proposal began to become clear in Claire's mind, and it was more frightening than any nightmare. You want to marry me to gain access to the Whitecrest inheritance. I want to marry you so that we can have a dignified life, Claire. You, me and our child. His voice became softer, almost convincing. Think about it. You have legal rights to the inheritance, but you don't have the resources to fight for them in court. I have the resources and the legal knowledge, but I don't have the rights. Together, we're unbeatable. And if I refuse? Jason's smile disappeared, revealing the coldness that had always been there, hidden. Then you will continue to be a bankrupt, pregnant and lonely woman, and I'll be forced to fight for custody of the child when it's born. Believe me, Claire, in a legal battle between a successful lawyer and a woman without resources, without a job, and with a tarnished reputation, well, you know how this will end. The threat was crystal clear. Claire felt nausea rising in her throat, this time definitely not related to the pregnancy. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering a mutually beneficial partnership. Jason took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. Here are the preliminary papers. A prenuptial contract that guarantees that you maintain full rights over the Whitecrest inheritance, as long as you remain married to me for at least 5 years. After that, if you want a divorce, you'll keep 60% of everything. Claire took the envelope with trembling hands. And if I don't sign? Then, my dear, you'll discover what kind of father I can be when I don't get what I want. He stood up, leaving a $50 bill on the table. Think carefully, Claire. You have 3 days. After he left, Claire was left alone with the envelope and the weight of the most important decision of her life. Jason was offering financial, security and legal protection, but at a price that she knew would destroy her inside. Henry had rejected her out of wounded love and betrayed pride, but at least his feelings for her had been genuine. Now she faced a man who saw in her and the child she carried merely pieces in a game of power and money. That night, alone in her cramped apartment, Claire placed her hand on her belly and whispered to the child growing inside her, "What do I do, my baby? How do I protect you without completely destroying myself?" But the only answer she received was the deafening silence of a life that had completely spiraled out of control. It was 3 a.m. when she finally fell asleep, still wearing the clothes from the previous day, with Jason's envelope on the table and dried tears on her face. And that's when the contractions began. Claire woke up at 5 a.m. with a searing pain in her abdomen that made her double over. The bleeding had started again, more intense this time, staining the sheets dark red. With trembling hands, she managed to call 911. and 20 minutes later she was being rushed to Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. "Possible miscarriage," she heard the paramedic saying over the radio. 20-week pregnant woman, active bleeding, elevated. Blood pressure. The words echoed in her mind like a nightmare. 20 weeks. She was almost halfway through the pregnancy, and now she could lose everything. In the ambulance, with the sirens cutting through the silence of the early morning, Claire wondered if it might be better this way. Losing the child would also mean losing the only bargaining chip Jason had over her. At the hospital, it was a rush of doctors, nurses, ultrasound exams, and cardiac monitors. Claire floated between consciousness and unconsciousness, hearing fragments of medical conversations that seemed to come from very far away. The fetus still has a heartbeat, but the placenta is detaching. We need to stabilize the hemorrhage. Where? Is her family? Someone should be notified. Family. Claire almost laughed through the pain. What family? She was completely alone in the world, with no one who cared whether she lived or died. It was then that through the haze of sedatives, she heard a familiar voice speaking to the doctors in the hallway. "I'm the father of the child. Jason Marshall, attorney. I came as soon as I heard." How had he known? Claire tried to speak, to protest, but her voice came out only as a hoarse whisper. Jason entered the room with an expression of concern that could fool anyone who didn't know him. "How are you feeling?" he asked, taking her hand with a gentleness she knew was completely false. How did you know I was here?" "I have contacts. At the hospital. When your name appeared in the emergency system, I was notified." He leaned closer, his voice low. "We need to talk, Claire. The doctors said that you and the baby are at serious risk." Dr. Carver, the obstetrician in charge of the case, entered at that moment with a grave expression. "Ms. Davis, I need to be frank with you. There has been a partial detachment of the placenta. We've managed to stabilize the bleeding for now, but the pregnancy is classified as high risk." "Will the baby be okay?" asked Claire, her voice weak. "For now, yes. But you will need absolute rest, constant medical monitoring, and frankly, a stress-free environment. Any additional emotional tension could trigger serious complications." Jason spoke up immediately. "Doctor, I'm the father of the child and an attorney. I can guarantee that Claire will have the best medical care available. I have a premium health insurance plan and resources to cover any necessary treatment." Dr. Carver seemed relieved. "Excellent. Because frankly, the patient's current state indicates that she is not in a condition to go through this pregnancy alone." After the doctor left, Jason moved a chair closer to Claire's bed. "Did you hear what he said? You can't do this alone." "It's none of your business." "Yes. It is, Claire. It's my child, too." His voice became harder, and now that there's a real risk of losing the child, my offer becomes even more generous. "What offer?" Jason took new papers from his pocket. "Immediate marriage. I'll cover all medical expenses. You move into my house where you'll have 24-hour medical care, and when the child is born, we begin the legal process to reclaim your inheritance." "And if I refuse?" "Then you go back to your mold-infested apartment. Try to survive with public health care and probably lose the child in the next few weeks." He paused. "Oh, and I'll still fight for paternal rights over any child that survives." Claire closed her eyes, feeling tears streaming down her cheeks. She was cornered. Jason had orchestrated everything perfectly. She had no real choice. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice dangerously low. "I discovered something interesting about your dear Henry Whitecrest." "What?" "He's not as indifferent to your situation as he would like to appear. My contacts informed me that he's been asking questions about you, where you're living, how you're supporting yourself." Claire's heart jumped. "Henry asked about me?" "He did. And you know what else? He's also been investigating his Uncle Edward's inheritance. It seems that our dear Henry discovered that you have legal rights that could restore his part of the family inheritance." The revelation hit Claire like lightning. "He wants the inheritance?" "He wants to recover what he lost, and you, my dear, are the key to that." Jason smiled coldly. "The difference is that he wants to use you without offering anything in return. I at least am offering marriage and security." At that moment, as if conjured by the conversation, Henry Whitecrest appeared at the door of the room. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his face that she had never seen before. His eyes fixed first on Claire, then on Jason, and finally on Jason's hand over Claire's. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, his voice hoarse. "How did you hear?" asked Claire, trying to sit up in bed. "I have contacts too." Henry entered the room, his eyes not leaving Jason. "Jason Marshall, I didn't expect to find you here." "Henry," Jason stood up, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a coincidence, or perhaps it's not a coincidence, considering your sudden interest in Claire's situation." "My interest in Claire is personal," Henry replied, coldly ignoring the extended hand. "Personal?" Jason laughed. "How interesting, because as far as I know, you expelled her from your property and cancelled your wedding in a rather dramatic fashion." Claire saw Henry's jaw tighten. "Circumstances have changed." "Ah, yes, they have, especially after you discovered about Edward's inheritance, isn't that right?" The silence that followed was charged with tension. Claire realized she was witnessing something much bigger than a simple dispute over her. It was a fight for power, money, and control. "You know, Henry," continued Jason, clearly enjoying being in control of the situation, "Claire and I have a proposal for you, one that can benefit all of us." "What proposal?" asked Henry, though his eyes remained fixed on Claire. "Partnership. Claire has the legal rights, I have the legal knowledge, and you have, well, you have the need to recover your position in the family." Jason sat down again, pulling the chair closer to the bed. "We can divide the inheritance into 3 equal parts." "And what does Claire get out of this?" asked Henry. "Security, stability, and the guarantee that her child will be raised with all the privileges he deserves." "Her child?" Henry looked at Claire. "So you're going to marry him?" Claire opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. How could she explain that she had no choice? That she was being blackmailed by a man without scruples, who saw in her only an opportunity to get rich? She already said yes. Jason lied shamelessly. "Is that true?" Henry asked Claire directly, and there was something in his voice, a vulnerability, a desperate hope that broke her heart. Claire looked between the 2 men who represented her only options, Jason, who offered security through manipulation and blackmail, and Henry, who perhaps wanted her back only for the legal rights she represented. She began, but the words were lost when a new wave of pain shot through her. The monitors began to beep frantically, and nurses rushed into the room. The last thing Claire saw before losing consciousness was Henry's face, pale with genuine fear and concern. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe love was stronger than pride and ambition. Or maybe she was just dreaming as she fought to keep alive the child that could either save her or completely destroy her. Claire woke up 3 days later in a private hospital room, decorated with fresh flowers and bathed in the soft afternoon light. For a moment, disoriented by the medications, she thought she was dreaming, but then she saw Henry sleeping in the armchair next to her bed, his face tired and bearded, his clothes wrinkled as if he hadn't left there in days. "Henry?" Her voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. He opened his eyes immediately as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Claire, thank God you woke up. How long have I been here, and the baby?" 3 days, and the baby is fine. The doctors managed to completely stabilize the placenta." Henry moved closer to the bed, his eyes red with fatigue. "You gave us a terrible scare." "Us?" I haven't left here since you passed out." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Claire, we need to talk." "About what?" But she already knew. She could see in his eyes the same determination she had seen the day he asked her to marry him. "About us, about everything that happened." Henry pulled the chair closer. "These 3 days made me realize some things." "Henry, let me speak, please." His voice was loaded with emotion. "When I saw you here unconscious, fighting to keep your baby alive, I understood that I'm an idiot. A proud and stupid idiot." Claire felt tears welling in her eyes. I lied to you. I betrayed your trust. Yes, you lied. And I was furious, feeling humiliated. He gently took her hand. But I also understood why you lied. A woman alone, pregnant, rejected by the father of the child. You were desperate. That doesn't justify what I did. Maybe not. But it justifies forgiveness. Henry kissed her hand. Claire, I love you. I love you. And I want to love this child as if it were mine. I want us to be a family. Claire's heart raced. Are you sure it's not about the inheritance, about recovering your position in the family? Henry laughed softly, but it was a sad laugh. The inheritance, and of course Jason told you about that. He did. He said you only came back because you discovered that I can help you recover what you lost. It's true that I discovered about Edward's inheritance. It's true that this could solve my financial problems. Henry looked at her directly. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? Because when I saw you in that ambulance, when the doctors said you could die, I understood that none of this matters. Money, social position, wounded pride, none of it is worth a life without you. Claire wanted to believe, but the last few months had taught her to be cautious. And your family, Mrs. Helen, will never accept this. Then let her not accept it. I'm tired of living for the approval of people who only care about appearances. Henry stood up, walking to the window. You know what I discovered while investigating. The inheritance. I discovered that my family has been rotten for generations. Arranged marriages, hidden lovers, denied children. We are experts at destroying love in the name of tradition. Henry, I don't want to be part of that anymore. I want to build something new, something real. He turned to her. I want to marry you, for real this time. Not in a farce at the fair. Estate with 100 people pretending to be happy, but in a simple ceremony, just us and our truth. And Jason, asked Claire softly, he won't give up easily. Henry's face hardened. Leave Jason to me. At that moment, as if summoned by the conversation, Jason appeared at the door. He wore an impeccable suit and carried a bouquet of white roses, but there was something predatory in his smile. What a touching scene, he said, entering without being invited. The knight in shining armor returned to save the damsel in distress. Jason. Henry positioned himself between him and Claire's bed. Good that you showed up. We have matters to resolve. We certainly do. Jason put the flowers on a table and took some papers from his pocket. I have here the paternity recognition documents and a shared custody agreement. Shared custody. Claire tried to sit up in the bed. It's my legal right, darling. I'm the biological father of this child. Jason smiled coldly. And unlike Henry, I have the means to provide the best for my son. You don't want the child, said Henry. You want what it represents. And you don't? Jason laughed. At least I'm honest about my motivations. I'm not pretending it's all for love. It's not pretense. No? Then explain to me why you hired a private investigator to discover everything. About Edward's inheritance as soon as Claire left your life. Claire looked at Henry, searching for some sign that this wasn't true, but she saw the confirmation in his eyes. Is it true? She asked. It's true that I investigated, admitted Henry, but not for the reasons he's implying. No? Then why? Henry hesitated for a moment. Because I wanted to better understand who you were. I wanted to know if there were more things you hadn't told me. His honesty hurt more than any lie. Claire realized that in a way both men saw her as a means to an end. Jason wanted her money. Henry wanted his position back in the family. Understand one thing, both of you, she said, her voice becoming firmer. I am not anyone's property. I am not a bargaining chip or a prize to be disputed. Claire, Henry began. No, let me speak. She sat up completely in the bed, ignoring the pain. You two are here talking about my rights, my inheritance, my child, as if I were just an incubator with a potential bank account. That's not it, Henry protested. Yes, it is. Henry, you yourself admitted that you investigated me, and Jason, you're literally blackmailing me. Claire took a deep breath. I want both of you to leave. Now. Claire, be reasonable, said Jason. You need legal protection. I need peace. I need to think. She pressed the call button for the nurse. Please, leave. Claire. Henry approached the bed. Henry, please, I love you, but I need to know if you love me, or if you just want to recover your inheritance through me. The silence that followed was painful. Claire saw the internal struggle in Henry's eyes, between the love he felt for her and the ambition he had inherited from his family. I need time to think too, he said finally. Good. We both need it. The nurse entered at that moment, clearly sensing the tension in the room. The patient needs rest. Visiting hours are over. Jason was the first to leave, but he stopped at the door. Claire, you have 48 hours to make a decision. After that, I'm going to seek my legal rights. Henry hesitated longer, looking at her with an expression that mixed love and regret. Claire, 48 hours, she repeated, for both of you. When she was finally alone, Claire placed her hand on her belly and whispered, It's just you and me now, my baby. And somehow we're going to find a way out of this. But for the first time in months, she was no longer just reacting to circumstances. She was taking control of her own life, and she had a plan. In the 48 hours that followed, Claire made the most important decisions of her life. First, she hired her own lawyer, Ms. Marina Santos, a 50-year-old woman specializing in family and inheritance law, recommended by the hospital's social worker. Second, she asked for all documents related to Edward Whitecrest's inheritance that could be found in public archives to be brought to her. What she discovered surprised her. Ms. Davis, said Ms. Santos, sitting beside her bed with a folder full of papers, your situation is much more advantageous than you imagined. Edward Whitecrest not only recognized you as his daughter in his will, but also established a specific fund for you and your descendants. What do you mean? He created a clause guaranteeing that, should you appear, you would receive not only the direct inheritance, but also controlling interest in several family companies. Basically, you would become the largest individual heir of the Whitecrests. Claire could barely process the information. It means that you don't need Jason Marshall or Henry Whitecrest to claim what is rightfully yours. Ms. Santos smiled. In fact, they would need you. And my child? Can Jason really fight for custody? He can try, but considering that you will have more than sufficient resources to provide for the child, and that he abandoned you during the pregnancy, his chances are minimal. The lawyer closed the folder. Ms. Davis, you are not the defenseless woman they think you are. You have power. The question is, how do you want to use it? Claire asked for time to think. When she was alone, she looked out the hospital window and saw the city of Portland stretching before her. For the first time in months, she felt in control of her own destiny. It was then that she received an unexpected visit. May I come in? Mrs. Helen was at the door, but there was something different about her. The aristocratic haughtiness had been replaced by something that seemed like regret. Mrs. Helen, I didn't expect to see you here. The Whitecrest matriarch entered slowly, carrying an old wooden box. I came to return something that belongs to you. Claire looked at the box curiously. What is it? Letters. Letters. That your mother wrote to Edward, and that he wrote to her. Letters that we hid all these years. Mrs. Helen placed the box on the table, and also her diary from the last month she spent at the estate. Why are you giving me this now? Mrs. Helen sighed, suddenly looking much older. Because I made terrible mistakes. Claire, mistakes that destroyed lives and perpetuated a tradition of cruelty in our family. What mistakes? Your mother, Maria. She didn't die of natural causes, as we always said. The woman's voice trembled. She committed suicide. Claire's world stopped. What? When we discovered she was pregnant by Edward, I pressured my brother to send her away. I said terrible things about her, about the baby she was expecting. Edward was weak. He chose the family instead of love. Mrs. Helen wiped tears from her eyes. Maria went back to her village, but she was devastated. When you were born, she was deeply depressed. Your grandmother wrote to me asking for help, but I ignored it. Claire felt nausea rising in her throat. And she killed herself? She took rat poison. Your grandmother found the body and invented the fever story to protect you. Mrs. Helen looked directly into Claire's eyes. Your mother died because of our pride, our cruelty, and now you're here, and I see her in you. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want history to repeat itself, because Henry truly loves you and you love him too, and because our family has destroyed enough love for several lifetimes. Claire opened the box with trembling hands. On top was a photo of a young, beautiful woman holding a baby, her and her mother. Underneath, dozens of letters yellowed by time. There's one more thing, said Mrs. Helen, taking a sealed envelope from her purse. This letter your mother wrote for you before she left. She asked your grandmother to give it to you when you grew up, but she never gave it to me. Your grandmother thought it would be more painful than comforting. Perhaps she was right. Claire took the letter with reverence. It was simply addressed to my daughter Claire. Mrs. Helen, she said softly, may I ask you a question? Of course. If Henry hadn't been disinherited, if he was still the main heir of the family, would you have accepted our marriage? The question caught the woman off guard. She hesitated for a long moment before answering. Probably not. So nothing has really changed, has it? Yes, it has. I have changed. Mrs. Helen stood up to leave. Claire, don't let our past mistakes destroy your future. If you love Henry and he loves you, fight for it, but do it for the right reasons. After she left, Claire was alone with her mother's letter. When she finally found the courage to open it, the words she read changed everything. My dear Claire, if you are reading this, it means I wasn't strong enough to stay and raise you as you deserve. I know this is cowardly. I know I am failing. But the pain is too great to bear. I want you to know that you were conceived in love. Edward and I loved each other deeply, but sometimes love is not enough to overcome the prejudice and cruelty of the world. Don't let this happen to you. If someday you find someone who truly loves you, fight for that love, no matter what they say, no matter the obstacles. True love is worth any sacrifice. You are strong, my daughter, stronger than I was. Use that strength to be happy. Forever your mother who loves you, Maria. Tears streamed down Claire's face when she finished reading. Her mother had died of a broken heart, but left a lesson. Fight for true love. It was then that she was sure of what she needed to do. When Henry and Jason appeared at the hospital exactly 48 hours later, as she knew they would, Claire was waiting for them. She wore the clothes she had asked to be brought from the apartment and held a folder with documents. Gentlemen, she said, her voice firm and clear, thank you for coming. I've made my decision. And what is it? Asked Jason, clearly confident, that she would choose the security he offered. I'm going to fight for the inheritance alone. Claire opened the folder. I've hired my own lawyer and discovered that I have much more extensive rights than either of you imagined. Jason's face paled. Claire, be sensible. I am being sensible. For the first time in months, I'm being completely sensible, she turned to Henry. And as for us, that will depend on a single question. What question? Henry seemed genuinely nervous. Do you love me? Truly, completely, with no relation to money or inheritance or social position? Henry stared at her for a long moment. Claire could see the internal struggle in his eyes, the battle between the aristocratic upbringing he had received and the genuine feelings he nurtured for her. Yes, he said finally, I love you. I love you, and I want to raise this child with you regardless of anything else. Then prove it to me. How? Claire smiled for the first time in months. Marry me, now, today, at the courthouse, without a party, without family, with nothing but the two of us and our truth. Claire. Jason began. You have no voice in this decision, Jason, and if you try to interfere in my life or in the life of my child, you'll discover exactly the kind of power a Whitecrest can wield. Her smile was sweet, but there was steel behind it. For the first time in her life, Claire Davis knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. The question was, would Henry be willing to bet everything on their love? Henry looked at Claire for a long moment, and she saw a transformation happening in him in real time. The aristocratic man, educated to consider appearances and conventions above all else, was being replaced by someone more genuine, more human. You sure? He asked softly. A wedding at the courthouse without your inheritance guaranteed, without knowing if my family will ever accept this? I'm absolutely sure, Claire replied. The question is, are you? Jason tried to intervene once more. Claire, this is madness. You're making emotional decisions that will affect the rest of your life. Jason, said Claire without even looking at him, you have 10 seconds to leave this room before I call. Security. You can't prevent me from... I can and I will. I have money for the best lawyers in the country now, remember? And unlike you, I'll use it to protect the people I love, not to blackmail them. Jason still tried to argue, but the coldness in Claire's gaze made him realize that he had completely lost control of the situation. He left the room slamming the door, but not before muttering, "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Claire said, to the closed door. Then she turned to Henry. "Well, your answer?" Henry approached the bed, took her hands and kissed her softly. "My answer is yes. Yes to the courthouse wedding. Yes to building our own life away from my family's expectations. Yes to loving this child, regardless of who the biological father is." "Are you sure? Because once we leave that courthouse married, there's no going back. I'll be your wife out of love, not convenience." "I don't want convenience. I want you." Henry smiled, and for the first time in months, Claire saw in him the man she had fallen in love with. "But there's one thing I need to tell you first." Claire's heart raced. "What?" "About the investigation I did. About the inheritance." Henry took a deep breath. "It's true that I investigated your legal rights, but it wasn't out of greed." "Then why?" "Because I wanted to make sure you would be protected. When I expelled you from the estate, when I said all those cruel things..." His voice faltered. "I regretted it instantly. But my pride was greater than my courage." Claire studied him carefully. "Go on." "I spent weeks trying to find a way to reach out to you without seeming like I was swallowing my pride. When I discovered about the inheritance, I thought I could use it as an excuse to see you again. But when I got here and saw you in that ambulance," and he kissed her hands, "I understood that the inheritance was never about me. It was about having the means to protect you. Henry, let me finish. I want to give up my part of the inheritance." Claire blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "When we get married, I'll sign documents transferring any rights I may have over Edward's inheritance entirely to you and our child." Henry smiled. "I want our marriage to be based only on love, without any shadow of financial interest." "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do, for myself." He stood up, walking to the window. "Claire, you made me realize that I've spent my entire life being controlled by my family's wealth, first trying to maintain it, then trying to recover. I want to start from scratch with you. And how will we live? I'll work. I have a degree in agricultural management. I can get a job at any farm in Oregon. It won't be the luxurious life I could have offered you before, but it will be ours." Claire felt tears welling in her eyes. "Henry, are you sure? It's a very big change." "It's the change I should have made years ago." He returned to her side. "Claire, I want to build something new with you. A family based on true love, not on the rotten traditions of the White Crests." 2 hours later, Claire was being wheeled out of the hospital, against all medical recommendations, but with a special release that Ms. Santos had managed to arrange. Henry was waiting for her on the sidewalk with a taxi, wearing the same wrinkled suit from the last few days, but with a smile she hadn't seen in months. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ready." The courthouse was a simple building in downtown Portland, full of bored public officials and nervous couples. Claire and Henry joined the line like any other couple, without solemnity, without pomp, just with two hearts determined to bet on love. "Documents," requested the clerk without even looking up. Claire handed over her papers with trembling hands. After so many months of uncertainty, it seemed surreal to be there, about to marry the man she loved of her own free will. Claire? Davis and Henry Edward Whitecrest, read the woman. Do you confirm that you wish to enter into civil matrimony? We confirm, they said in unison. The ceremony lasted exactly 15 minutes. No music, no flowers, no guests, just the necessary words to make them legally husband and wife. But when Henry kissed her to seal the marriage, Claire felt as if it were the most beautiful ceremony in the world. Mrs. Whitecrest, he whispered against her lips. Mr. my husband, she replied, laughing through tears of happiness. Leaving. The courthouse, they found Ms. Santos waiting for them on the sidewalk with a bottle of champagne, non-alcoholic for Claire, and a radiant smile. Congratulations to the newlyweds. And I have a surprise for you. What surprise? Asked Claire. The inheritance papers were approved faster than we expected. Officially, as of Monday, you will be the main shareholder of 3 companies and owner of 40% of the Whitecrest estate. Claire looked at Henry, expecting to see some regret in his eyes. Instead, she saw only pride. So my wife is officially richer than I am, he said, laughing. Can I at least expect you to support me in style? Idiot, Claire kissed him again. We're rich, together. No, said Henry, gently touching her belly where the child was growing. We're a family. The rest is just detail. That night, in Claire's small apartment that they would now share until they found a house of their own, they made love for the first time as husband and wife. It was different from all the other times. There were no more secrets between them, no more doubts or fears, just pure, honest, and true love. Henry, whispered Claire afterward, nestled in his arms. There's something I need to tell you about. The baby. He tensed for a moment. What? Today, during the ultrasound at the hospital, I found out the sex. And? Claire smiled. It's a boy. Henry was silent for a long moment, just caressing her hair. A boy, he finally repeated. Are you okay with that? I'm better than okay. He kissed the top of her head. I'm looking forward to meeting my son. Our son, she corrected. Our son, he agreed. Edward Henry Whitecrest, in honor of your father. Claire pulled away to look at him. You want to give him the name of my father? I want him to carry the name of a man who truly loved, even if he didn't have the courage to fight for that love. Henry gently touched her belly. And I want him to grow up knowing that his parents fought to stay together. Henry? Yes? I love you completely, unconditionally, forever. I love you too, Claire, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you every day. Outside, the fine rain of Portland began to fall again, but this time Claire heard it as a lullaby. Finally, after a lifetime of feeling displaced, she had found her place in the world, in the arms of the man she loved, awaiting the child they would raise together. The story of the Whitecrests was about to gain a new chapter, a chapter written with true love. 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, Claire held in her arms Edward Henry Whitecrest, a baby with dark eyes and brown hair who had come into the world with the determination of someone who had come to change stories. The delivery had been smooth, surrounded by the love of Henry, who had not left her side for even a minute. He has your eyes, said Henry, gently caressing the baby's tiny face. And your stubbornness, replied Claire, laughing softly. He was born 2 weeks early, because he didn't want to wait any longer. They were in the house they had bought together, a simple but cozy property on the outskirts of Portland, surrounded by gardens that Henry personally tended. He had found work as an administrator at an agricultural cooperative, and although the salary was modest compared to what he was used to, he had never been happier. Claire, in turn, had used part of the inheritance to establish a foundation supporting single mothers in vulnerable situations in memory of her own mother. The rest of the money remained invested, securing the future of Edward and any other children they might have. There's a visitor, announced Henry, peeping through the window. Mrs. Helen is arriving. Claire wasn't surprised. The Whitecrest matriarch had become a constant presence in their lives in recent months, in an evident attempt to repair the mistakes of the past. At first, Claire had been cautious, but gradually allowed the older woman to get closer. "You can let her in," said Claire, adjusting Edward in her arms. Mrs. Helen entered with the discretion of someone who still wasn't sure of her place in this new family configuration. She carried a carefully prepared package in her hands. "How is my great-grandson?" she asked, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the baby. "Growing every day," replied Henry. "And you, Aunt? How are things at the estate?" "Different, very different." Mrs. Helen sat in the armchair next to the sofa where Claire was resting. "Since you left home and Claire assumed her part of the inheritance, we've had to rethink many traditions." "For the better, I hope," said Claire. "Definitely for the better. The employees now have decent health plans, the families living on the property have received deeds to their lots, and we're implementing sustainable agricultural practices." Mrs. Helen smiled. "Changes we should have made decades ago. And the other family members? How are they handling all this? Some still resist, but most have understood that it was time to evolve." Mrs. Helen handed the package to Claire. "This is for Edward, a tradition I want to maintain, but in a different way." Claire opened the package and found a beautifully bound photo album. The first pages showed generations of Whitecrests, great-grandparents, grandparents, uncles, cousins. But as the pages advanced, the story changed. There were photos of Claire and Henry at the courthouse, of the simple wedding, of the pregnancy, and even some of the newborn baby. "It's our new family tree," explained Mrs. Helen. "No longer just about blood and titles, but about love and choices. Edward will be the first Whitecrest to grow up knowing that a person's value is not in their birth, but in their actions." Claire felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Helen. This means a lot to us." "It means a lot to me, too. You've given me the chance to be part of something genuine for the first time in decades." At that moment, the phone rang. Henry answered, and Claire noticed by the change in his expression that it was important news. "That was Ms. Santos," he said after hanging up. "Jason has officially given up any claim to Edward. He signed the papers renouncing paternity." Claire felt neither relief nor sadness. Jason had become irrelevant in her life the moment she chose true love. "There's more," continued Henry. "He's being investigated for tax fraud and money laundering. It seems our dear ex-suitor wasn't as clean as he liked to appear." "Karma," murmured Mrs. Helen. "Sometimes life takes care of justice on its own." Claire looked at the baby in her arms, then at Henry, and finally at Mrs. Helen. "You know what? I don't want to talk about Jason anymore. He's not part of our story." "Our story," repeated Henry, sitting beside her and putting his arm around her shoulders. "I like how that sounds." Edward chose that moment to open his little eyes and look directly at Claire, as if he knew exactly what was happening around him. She smiled at him, whispering, "Hi, my love. Welcome to the craziest and most wonderful family in the world." "Henry," said Mrs. Helen suddenly, "I want to make a proposal." "What proposal?" "I want you to come back to the estate, not to live in the main house, but to build your own home on a part of the property. Edward should grow up knowing his roots, but in a new, healthy way." Claire and Henry looked at each other. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it would be good for Edward to know where he comes from, and maybe we can help the family continue changing for the better." Claire looked at Mrs. Helen. "But with some conditions." "What conditions?" "Our house, our rules. Edward grows up knowing he is loved regardless of his biological origin, and no pressure about future marriages, careers, or any of those outdated traditions." "I completely agree," said Mrs. Helen quickly. "In fact, I'm eager to see what kind of traditions you'll create." 3 years later, the Whitecrest estate had become an example of sustainable agriculture and social responsibility in Oregon. Claire directed the foundation that helped hundreds of families. Henry supervised agricultural innovations, and Edward grew up running through the fields, loved by everyone who knew him. In the house they built, modern, cozy, and full of light, there was an entire wall dedicated to family photos. Not just the traditional Whitecrests, but also the estate employees, the families benefited by the foundation, and all those who had become part of their extended story. On a winter evening, with Edward sleeping in her lap and the fire crackling in the fireplace, Claire and Henry talked about the future. "Sometimes I still can't believe we made it here," she said. "I can," replied Henry, kissing her head. "I always knew you were strong enough to change anything you touched." "We are strong. Together." "Together," he agreed. "Forever." Edward stirred in Claire's arms, smiling even in his sleep, as if he could feel the love surrounding him. And perhaps he could. After all, he was the fruit of a story that had begun with lies and pain, but had chosen to transform into truth and love. Outside, the fine rain of Oregon began to fall again, but this time it sounded like music. The music of a family that had learned that true love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay and fight every day for each other's happiness. And in that house full of love, on an estate transformed by forgiveness, a new generation of Whitecrests was growing up who would know only one tradition, that of loving, without conditions, accepting without judgments, and building a future based on hope instead of fear. Claire Davis, who had spent her entire life feeling displaced, had finally found her place. Not in a name or an inheritance, but in the love she had built with her own hands, and in the son she was raising to be free from all the prejudices that had almost